Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Matt, and welcome back. In this, we have a really special interview today. We're going to be talking about building a PC. So, a lot of you guys have expressed more interest in the specifics about building a PC for your flight simulator specifically. Turns out it's not really much more than a really beefed up, overpowered gaming PC. I have brought my brother Josh into play today. He's an amateur not flight simmer, but I would say aviation enthusiast in a way, and also a PC builder. Aviation runs in the blood, so I figured he'd be a perfect person to bring into this. Also a technology guy as well, so he's also a podcaster, A+ certified in programming and all kinds of other cool stuff. So I figured it'd make a perfect person to bring in and get a lot of questions answered that I don't know the answers to, that I know he would be much better suited to get these PC building questions answered. So what's up, Josh?
Hey. Yeah, like you said, I'm A+ certified, and I've been building my own custom PCs for upwards of 20 years. And not that much has changed, surprisingly, over that amount of time. And also, just another notch on my belt, I can think of at least 3 family members right off the top of my head that have had at least a private pilot's license, if not something more than that. We're a very flight-oriented family, definitely. So,
Also, you guys might remember Josh from one of my previous videos. Can my brother land my flight simulators? So,
and the answer was yes. Yes, I could.
he did
Pretty well, actually.
You did a good job. You did well.
I feel like if it had been real life, that may have been what would have happened. We'd all be dead. But since the stakes weren't very high, I managed to keep it together.
Let's jump into this. So I've got a few things that I had questions about, and just kind of what I thought of what it would be like to build a flight sim PC. Just a quick plug for a different video that I made on how to build a flight PC or a flight simming PC. I'll leave a link up there or over there, wherever the link pops up. But go watch that video if you haven't already watched it. Basically, all it's really telling you is if you want to know the specs for or what you need to put into the flight sim, go to the X-Plane site or go to Microsoft Flight Simulator site and look it up. Their ideal specs are right there on their site, and they basically give you a laundry list. So that's kind of the crux of that video. But this video here, what Josh and I are doing, is going to take that video to the next level. So we're going to jump right into this. And what I would really like to know to begin with is what do we need to buy? What are we going to put into this thing?
Yeah, and just to add on to what you were saying real quick before I leap into that, any self-respecting video game, especially all your AAA games and any self-respecting indie game, is going to have all of its specs right there on its Steam store page or its Epic retail store or wherever you're buying it from. I don't know if you can even still buy boxed games in a brick and mortar store, but it's going to be right there on the box if they do. Anyway, so what we need to build a computer, it's a short list, but it's an important list. I mean, obviously, you need your case. I mean, I prefer to start from the inside out, but let's start with what you see. Obviously, you've got your case. Inside of it, we've got the motherboard, easily the most important component of any PC. And then the processor, heat sink that goes on top of that processor to dissipate all of its heat, fans to dissipate the rest of the heat from the case, a graphics card so that you can play video games, RAM so that you can have memory and do more than one thing at a time, power supplies, obviously, so that you can, run the computer at all, and peripherals, of course, monitor, webcam, speakers, microphone, keyboard, and mouse. That's a pretty thorough list of everything that you will need to buy for your own PC. It's a fairly short list, really, at the end of the day. It's not that complicated.
I think what's complicated is what's going on up here. When a lot of people think building my own PC, I think it scares most people.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's what we're here to discuss today, though, is hopefully demystifying that and making it sound like hopefully a little bit of a simpler task
Yeah, it can be a very daunting task. I get that. And I think there's a lot of knowledge that I have that I take for granted. But nevertheless, I promise you, if you've got the time and the energy and you want to take this up as a hobby, then you absolutely can do it. I don't believe that there's going to be any barriers for you if you have the interest. It's not rocket science. It's not brain surgery. It's a very attainable goal. But it does require a little bit of attention to detail, and you need to trust and be confident in your troubleshooting skills and your GoogleFu. If that's all you have to be able to do, is you need to be able to look things up and find things on Google, because I guarantee you the information is there. You just need to have patience and be willing to look for it.
GoogleFu. I haven't heard that one before.
GoogleFu.
All right. I'll make sure to use that. All right. So let's start with a case, because the way that I'm thinking about things is you get a case and then you buy all this stuff and then you stick it in there somehow. So I assume that we start with the case. Maybe that's not the case, but would... Yeah, right. See what I did there?
You're going to list this as a comedy video?
I might have to. Not education. So
you need a brick wall behind you.
That I do. I might.
Okay. So first of all, starting with the case, totally doable. I understand it's the first thing that you see. It's what everybody else sees when you're done with it. Personally, I prefer to start at the motherboard, but that's okay. We can work with this. So let's start with the case. And yes, to answer your question, bigger absolutely is better. A recurring theme that you're going to notice, just remember the letters ATX. It's a form factor. There are multiple different form factors of types, of standards, of sizes for different PCs and other things that you can build, like phones, tablets. Micro ATX is a thing if you want a really tiny PC. But your standard tower PC, like what you've got, like what most people have, is just standard ATX form factor, and you're going to find that in a full tower size and in a server tower size. And I'm going to recommend one of those. Probably the server tower size, because yes, especially for beginners, bigger is better. Unless you have serious space issues in your home office situation, a bigger case is going to allow you easier assembly, more options for organizing your components, better, easier airflow cooling, and it's going to allow you to expand later if you want to upgrade.
What about, we talk about power supply? I have an 850 to put things into perspective, but I don't know why I need an 850 over something else.
Okay, great. Yeah, certainly you're going to want to err on the side of caution, which is essentially bigger is better. But in this case, that doesn't mean size. That means wattage capacity. So 800, it's a little bigger than I would normally go, but you probably needed it. Do you have one video card or two?
I have one big one.
One video card. Okay. Well, I mean, that's okay, because the more wattage capacity that you have, then the less work that power supply is going to have to do to run your computer. It's not that it's going to use less power. It's not going to like save you energy on your energy bill, but it is going to make your components able to run smoother and easier. And at the very least, your power supply is not going to have to work as hard, and you're less likely to have to replace it later on down the line, and it will keep up with the lifespan of the rest of your components. Again, you're looking for ATX form factor, because that's how you know that the plugs, the jacks, whatever you want to call them, it comes with a set of cables that you have to run to very specific standardized ports on your motherboard and different components, and those are going to be SATA, and the plugs themselves are also called ATX plugs. And so yeah, ATX. Just remember ATX. And so when you're shopping for one, just read the reviews. Don't go with a cheapo off-brand. You get what you pay for. I mean, if you're working on a budget, I get it. Just find the best that you can for what you can afford. Um, and then the most important thing is how whoever built your computer probably did their math to figure out that you need an 800 watt power supply. Is you need the sum of your components wattage draw to equal a maximum, in my opinion, 75% of your power supply's full capacity. So, for instance, if you buy a 400 watt power supply, your components in total should never add up to more than 300 watts of electrical drawing potential. So, you've got an 800 watt power supply. So, all your components probably add up to a maximum draw of 600 watts. Basically, you should be able to check all the specifications of all your components as you're buying them, and it'll say its maximum wattage draw. And you put that on a list, you add it all up, and you multiply it by 1.5, and that's the minimum wattage that you're going to want out of your power supply. Will it work if you go with a 90% ratio or even 100 and just max it out and let it run at full bore? Yeah, probably for a minute. But you're going to burn something out, whether it's a component or the power supply itself. And that's no fun. And it's just going to cost you more money and give you more headaches in the long run. I hear a lot of horror stories about people's components burning out and failing, like hard drives, RAM, whole motherboards and stuff. Personally, that's never happened to me. I did have a video card fail on a laptop one time, but that wasn't something that I had personally built, so it doesn't count. But the only thing I've ever had fail that I had to replace, and I think it was on Mom's computer actually, but that was a computer I built for her, and that was the power supply. I had to replace the power supply. So I probably, that was a long time ago, so I probably just didn't get one that was high enough wattage for that build.
Let's talk about the motherboard. That was one that really confused me. I was like, I don't know one motherboard from a different one, so I'm sure that the more you pay for one, the better it's probably going to be, but I don't know what the differences are going to be or why I would need one over another. Do you have any insights to that?
I hope so. Again, this is one of the holy trinity of things that we're looking for: ATX form factor. You got to make sure that your motherboard is ATX because it needs to fit into an ATX case, and it needs to match ATX power supply connectors. So those are the main three things that all need to be ATX. Otherwise, one thing's not going to fit another, and then you're screwed, and you have to send something back. And if you mess up the motherboard, you've just messed up your entire build, and now nothing's going to be compatible. So that's why I like to start with the motherboard. And honestly, the case is an afterthought for me. I buy the case last. I just go for something that's big and pretty. But motherboard, yeah. So ATX form factor. Again, don't cheap out. You get what you pay for. I know. Find just a trusted, well-reviewed brand. As I understand, we're going to provide you a short list of brands and models we recommend. And even if you just Google it, use that GoogleFu. The last time I built a computer, I just looked up the top rated and top sold motherboards on the market right now, and I went with like number 10 because it's had all of the capabilities that I was looking for. It had good enough ratings. It was the price range that I was looking for, because I mean, you can drop $3,000 to $5,000 on just a motherboard, and I wasn't playing with that kind of money. I was playing with more money than I've ever played with before building a PC, but most of that's just inflation. Your motherboard is going to decide so many different things for you, and we're going to cover these things in more detail next after we finish talking about motherboards. But the motherboard is talking about everything else anyway. It wants to know, do you need an Intel or an AMD processor? Personally, I'm going to recommend Intel. AMD's not bad, but from what I understand, it's generally better for advanced users, people who know what they're doing, know what kind of extra features AMD is capable and better at than Intel. But for the most part, tomato, they're pretty well matched. No wrong answer on Intel or AMD, but you have to choose one when you pick a motherboard. because motherboards only support one or the other. There's no such thing as a motherboard that supports Intel and AMD. Not a thing. Also, your motherboard decides what kind of RAM you're going to need. The most up-to-date RAM currently is DDR5. Your motherboard also decides what kind of hard drive you can use. It's not quite as complicated as the other things. Most likely, you're going to be able to run both solid-state and mechanical hard drives off of any motherboard that you pick up these days. But you need to check. You need to know before you buy it. Depending on what you plan to use. If you want to have a combination of these or exclusively one or the other, it's just something you need to pay attention to. And we're going to talk more about hard drives in a minute. PCI slots. PCI slots are important for expansion, and they're most important for PCI Express slots for your graphics card. Most motherboards are going to have around 5 PCI slots, and only 1 or 2 of them, 2 maximum, are going to be PCI Express slots. Actually, don't quote me on that. There's probably boards with more than 2. But generally, you're going to find only 1 or 2 PCI Express slots, or PCIe is what they're going to be listed as. And that's where you put your graphics cards. And graphics cards are huge these days. So if you plan on having 2 of them, that's another reason that you absolutely need a large server size case. Because it's just going to be easier to work with. It might technically be possible with a smaller case, but you're going to be mad at yourself for trying it, especially if it's your first PC build. You're going to be like, is this really supposed to fit in here like this? I don't know. Well, yeah. When you're working with a bunch of parts that are made by different companies, they've done a really good job of standardizing things, but it's still different companies making these things, so it's never a full guarantee. So just err on the side of caution. And just remember that your motherboard decides how many video cards that you will be capable of running. You can dual wield 2 like a boss if you want to be that guy, or you can run just one really good card because you're a sane person, like me. That's probably going to be plenty if you're just trying to run a flight simulator. It all just depends on what you're doing. No wrong answers.
Let's talk about processors. The biggest thing, I think, to me, it seems like this would be a big question, but maybe it's not as big of a question. But if you're going to build a flight simulator, it's kind of like, okay, there's the Intel route or there's the AMD route. Maybe they're not routes at all. Maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe you can get an AMD and put an NVIDIA RTX graphics card on there. I don't know. But Intel or AMD, which way should I go? And why would I take the route that I take?
Well, to answer one of your questions in there, you can use NVIDIA with either AMD or Intel, and vice versa. That's going to work either way. But AMD also makes their own Radeon series of graphics cards that, from what I've heard, work better if you're using an AMD chipset. But personally, I'm an NVIDIA fanboy, and I used to use AMD processors, but I don't think I was getting the full potential out of them that I could have. And I've recently switched to Intel just because I'm not that level of geek to try and dive into that. I just want to play some games. And, I did 3D design for a while, but my carpal tunnel's too bad to keep doing that. So I'm a casual nerd, and that's why I'm here, is to help your viewers also be casual nerds and get to what you really want to do, which is play some games. You don't want to have to reverse engineer and learn how to code, and you're not trying to be Bill Gates here.
Correct.
You just want to put a computer together. So to answer your other question, which one should you choose? Again, personally, I'm voting Intel. But really, it's like asking Ford or Chevy, Android or iPhone, beer or wine. They're all going to get you drunk, okay? It's going to be okay. Just make a decision and go with it. I'm going to push you slightly towards Intel. because I think it's just going to work. It's just going to give you what you want and desire with less muss and less fuss. If you want to get deeper into it, maybe look into AMD. Do your research. Don't be scared of Google. Don't be scared of reading some weird forums where people have no social skills. That's going to happen a lot in this process. Hope you don't mind. It's part of being a geek. So yeah, all you really need to do after you've chosen Intel or AMD is just make sure that the socket type and the brand matches your motherboard specifications. That way you know that they're going to work together. Whether you want to get into hyper-threading or overclocking after that, that's on you. There's tons of tutorials on that on the internet. Good luck.
Just to be clear, when we talk about this, Intel or AMD, we're talking about a little processor that's maybe X size, right? And that goes on your motherboard?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. Some motherboards come with integrated graphics cards, which you can't actually see, so it's kind of a misnomer to call it a card. It's just built into the motherboard. It's probably an extra chip or set of board that you wouldn't ever think anything different of. You just be like, oh, that's part of the motherboard, but it's integrated graphics. But in your case, it's handy for this flight sim with as many monitors as you're running to have both. So that is a good point to bring up. Yeah, that is probably something you're going to want to look for if somebody's trying to build a setup like yours with upwards of 7 monitors. The most important specs to look for. This is back to the basics. If you're shopping out your own processor, you want to look at the megahertz or the gigahertz. A gigahertz is just 1,000 megahertz. So it just depends on where the comma or the dot is. So you want to look at the hertage and the socket type. For instance, I have a 5 gigahertz, 8 core, 1700 LGA. 1700 LGA is the socket type. And 5 gigahertz is the speed. 8 cores is how many cores. And the more cores, the faster it's going to be because each core is capable of processing its own thread of information. And when you get into hyperthreading, you're able to essentially have 2 virtual cores for each physical core, and that's its own thing. And because the crystals that they fabricate to run these processors are not an exact science in how they make them yet. When they make a crystal, they don't know how fast a speed it's going to support. It's just magic. They have to test it after they make the crystal and go, oh, this one's not very fast. Oh, this one's lightning fast. So this one's going to give somebody a 2.6 gigahertz processor. This one's going to give somebody a 6 gigahertz processor. So they're making these crystals. They used to have to find them in nature, but then they figured out how to fabricate them. And then they have to sort them out based on speed. And that's why it varies so much when you're shopping for processors. So if you want faster, look for a higher number. Pretty simple. More cores, the better. I've got 8. It's the most cores I've ever had in a processor, but the numbers just keep going up. And they're able to pack more and make them smaller, and it's just getting crazy. And when you get to the part of actually installing the processor into your motherboard, just remember not to touch the pins on the back of the processor. Make sure the pins are seated properly when you press down the clamp, so that you don't bend any pins and destroy the whole processor. That's an expensive mistake. Never personally done it, but I've heard of people who have. You're going to want it to lay flat. It'll depress right into the socket with ease. You shouldn't feel any resistance, and it will have a couple of millimeters movement tolerance, just the tiniest little bit. You should be able to shake it around. If there's no movement tolerance at all, or it feels slightly crooked or visibly crooked horizontally or vertically, then you need to take it back out and you need to start over. That's my little tip for that portion of building a computer. And don't forget thermal paste. They usually send you some with your processor, but I always order some separately just to be safe. Thermal paste, you have to put a few dabs on top of your processor when you're installing the heat sink on top of it, because otherwise it will cause overheating immediately without thermal paste. Full stop. Non-negotiable. Have you ever seen The Green Mile?
Yes, but it's been a long time.
Yeah. Well, if you've seen The Green Mile, you've learned the lesson the hard way. Don't electrocute a dude without a wet sponge. That's basically the same thing as installing a processor without thermal paste. Because otherwise, it can't dissipate the heat fast enough into the heat sink, and it will just straight up overheat. And it may or may not destroy the processor the second you start it up right out of the box.
Holy crap.
So that's why that's so important that I wanted to bring it up now. To put your fears a little at ease, you would probably only burn out the processor, and also you probably wouldn't burn out the processor. It would probably just not start up at all. I'm going to tell you right now, I've never built a single PC that has started up on my very first attempt of starting it. I always hit that button, and with eager anticipation, I'm staring at the screen, and I'm like, and nothing. Shit. Okay. So I guarantee that is going to be your first experience starting up your first built PC. Don't panic. Think it through. Figure out what you did wrong. Fix it. It'll be okay.
And then you're like, what did I miss? Crap.
Yeah, exactly. That's half the fun.
Let's talk about graphics cards and which one would be the way to go. A lot of flight sims nowadays are, like mine's built. Technically, I've got one main monitor, and then I've got one off to the side that I can, basically pull up Chrome and go to Sky Vector, do my flight planning, go, watch YouTube while I'm on a long flight with autopilot, or do whatever I need to on that side monitor. What are your thoughts on graphics cards? I know they got the 4080s, 4090s out now, so.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm not completely up to date on this. I'm about as up to date as you are. I've personally got a 3070 Ti that was supposed to have about the same graphics power as the 2080. And the 2080s during the pandemic were just impossible to get. Graphics cards in general, though, of any use, were impossible to get for a solid year. And that was exactly when I wanted a graphics card the most. I was like, my life, what luck. I'm sorry, you probably don't want me swearing on here, do you?
I don't know what YouTube thinks about that, so I might have to beep it out just to be on the safe side. But
I don't think YouTube cares. I don't know about your audience, though. There's so much that you can say about graphics cards, but I'm going to defer you to the experts on that one. I like NVIDIA. I've never had a problem with NVIDIA. And 4090, 4080 is the most recent series that I'm aware of. If you don't want to buy literally the most expensive card on the market, you're going to do just fine with a 3070 or a 3080. I assume there's probably also a 3090. And you're going to be just fine. There's no reason to bog anything down with any more geek talk than that. If you want two of them, go for it. Great. You just make sure your motherboard can support two of them and get a big enough case so that you're not having to squeeze cables in between. You're going to hate yourself if you have to remove it 10 times in order to get everything in the right configuration and then put it back in, because it can be nerve-wracking. Like, oh, I paid so much money for this. It feels so like it wants to snap as I'm pulling it out. And I've never had one do that, but it's still kind of scary.
If you get a motherboard and you get all this stuff installed and you're like, crap, I can't get two video cards in here, and you're starting to run out of space, and you're like, I need a different case. We're going to need a bigger case. Can you just take all this stuff out and stick it in a different case?
Very probably. Yeah, there's going to be screw holes on the back of the case for a variety of different configurations, and one of them is, as long as it's ATX, one of them is going to match the layout of your motherboard. There's only a handful of different layouts. But basically, it's a rectangle. It's just different sizes of rectangles and making the holes fit into other holes when you screw it in. It's pretty simple stuff. If you bought yourself a full tower and you said, oh crap, this isn't big enough, I need to go to a server size tower, that's not going to be a problem.
Let's talk about video RAM. I know there's a difference between RAM and video RAM. So I think most, like if you go to X-Plane, I think they're looking at like their ideal specs, I believe, are around 12. I believe 12 gigabytes. How does that work? Is that built into the video card? So if you get a RTX 3080, do you need to be looking at the specs on that? Is that where you can't upgrade that? You get what you get inside of that video card, right?
That is absolutely correct. Video RAM or VRAM is just baked in part of the graphics card, and you just need to pay attention to how much you're getting when you shop out that card. Um, and just like normal RAM, the more the merrier. The more you have, the better you're going to be able to run things, the faster it's going to run things. For example, the first time I ever encountered an issue with not having enough VRAM, I was playing Fallout 4. I only had 1 gig of VRAM, and this was probably whenever Fallout 4 came out. I want to say like 2013 or 14 is when I was playing it anyway. You need 4 gigabytes of VRAM in order to play that game without it crashing all the time. I only had 1. Personally, now I have 8 on my GTX 370 Ti, and it's great. It's more than enough for anything that I run. I wanted to be able to play Half-Life Alyx in VR, and anything VR is rendering whatever you're playing twice, once for each eye, and it does that without a problem. But if X-Plane or Microsoft Flight Sim or whatever is recommending 12 gigabytes of VRAM, I'm betting the minimum specs on that are going to be 8, but it's recommending 12. I would defer to whatever they're recommending for an ideal playing experience.
Let's talk about the cooling system. I know that all these PCs need to be cooled. They run hot. I could literally use this computer as a freaking small room heater.
Oh yeah.
So I can only imagine what would happen if you weren't running some kind of cooling system, whether it's water cooled, whether you got a fan in there. But what do you suggest, and what are your thoughts behind it?
Basically, if you're using water cooling, those are basically your two options: water or air. But the question I ask when it comes to water cooling is, are you a gambler? Because if you're willing to take the small risk that your water cooling system is going to spring a leak and destroy literally your whole computer, then water cooling is otherwise very effective. I've used it before and I've had zero problems. But I want to say something like 10% of users have problems out of the gate, out of the box, with water cooling systems that spring leaks and destroy everything, and that may or may not be covered by your warranty or your insurance or anything. You might just be out all of that money. And even if you don't have any problems out of the box, eventually rubber hoses are going to decay the longer you use it. The more you need to consider replacing it. Eventually, if you've got rubber hoses on there, I believe there are larger ones. I've never really gotten into water cooling too much, but I believe there are larger ones that fill up like the entire chassis, and it runs metal tubes around like the perimeter of your entire PC. And those might be more reliable. I'm not sure. That's a whole rabbit hole for you to explore. But as the casual nerd that I am, I've never had a problem with air cooling. It works if you do it right, and you don't have to worry about any of that risk of water spraying all over inside your computer and causing a fire and losing money on things that you paid a lot of money for. If you want to just be positive that it's going to work, go with air cooling. Fans are completely reasonable. All you need to do is you need to pay attention to your cable management inside your case, where you're placing your components. If you can avoid it, don't sandwich a bunch of hard drives on top of each other. If you can have any space between two video cards, do it. If you can't, you can't. Video cards luckily have fans built into them anyway. It's probably going to be fine if you can't avoid sandwiching components together, but you still need to make sure that there's some sort of central stream of air going throughout the tower. And you're going to want to be sure to remove any unused fittings Like most cases these days are toolless, and you just get these little trays that you can install your hard drives into. You just clip them right in there. If you're not using that many hard drives, take those extra pieces out. They're just going to stop air from flowing through.
You said the hard drive tray. So if there's a tray in there, you just want to take those out because they're just blocking the air.
If you're not using it, yes.
Gotcha.
Don't use your case for storage for extra parts, even if those are parts that are for the case. Just take them out if you're not using it. They'll get in the way and they'll affect airflow and ultimately your PC's overall performance. I personally like to make sure I have at least 2 fans on the rear that blow in, 2 more on the front that also blow in, and 2 fans on the top that blow out. So because hot air rises, you're going to get a chimney effect, and all your hot air, you're going to have 2 sources of fresh, cool air, and it's all going to naturally want to go up anyway. So you just encourage it to go up out of your PC. And that has worked like a charm for me for the entire time I've been building PCs. Like you said, you've just built yourself a little space heater now. It's an effective computer, but you've got all that hot air coming up out of the top. If you want to get creative, you can build some a series of tunnels or pipes, hoses, if you will, and lead that out a window or something. I've got an idea in mind to use some dryer hoses and to 3D print a fitting that will go over the top of my PC and fit a dryer hose and then run it to the window. Kind of like an air conditioner hose. Yeah. It's not a terrible idea to literally build your computer an exhaust hose, because if it's going to make your room too hot, I get very uncomfortable very quickly if there's too much heat in the room. So that's something to consider, and something you're really not going to be able to avoid if you've got a high-end gaming PC in the room with you. Another solution, I suppose, is to stick it in a different room and run cables to it so that you're not actually in the same room as the PC. And since we don't have CD-ROMs or floppy drives that we need to regularly access anymore, that's a more realistic solution. And you could even run a USB hub on a long cable so that you can still put your flash drives in and out from the desk without having to go access the computer itself. So that's another cooling solution. Oh, and I pulled this out just for reference purposes. This is a 120 millimeter fan. This is the standard size that I use. They come a little smaller than this. They come a little bigger than this. But I use 120 millimeter, and that gets the job done for me.
When it comes to hard drives, we'd be looking at a very minimal 1 terabyte, if not more, especially if you're going to run X-Plane, X-Plane 11, X-Plane 12, Microsoft Flight Simulator. If you're one of those that like to have different ones, I would say have a dedicated hard drive for each one. But do you have a recommendation for SSD, which is solid state? Those are the quick thumb drive ones, or the old mechanical ones. What are your thoughts on those?
It is a bit of a misnomer to refer to a solid state drive as a thumb drive. It is the same technology, but it is plugged directly into your hard drive via either a SATA cable or even just direct pins, just like a stick of RAM, which is what I have. Yeah, solid state is in every way superior, but it's more expensive. It's faster, it's smaller. SATA is both a data transfer protocol and a power transfer protocol. One SATA cable going from your hard drive to the motherboard, and another one going from the hard drive to the power supply for each hard drive that you have. There's no reason that I can think of off the top of my head that you would absolutely need more than one hard drive right out of the gate, unless you really, really, really want to have a redundant backup system. I was going to say mechanical hard drives are still a fine, completely reasonable option if you need to go a little bit cheaper, and if you want to mess around with a RAID array. But a mechanical hard drive fills up and gets slower. I mean, obviously, solid states also fill up, but as they fill up, the way that it accesses the information does not cause it fundamentally to slow down. And you can use any combination of multiple hard drives. You can use solid state and mechanical. And if you're doing that, definitely put your operating system on the solid state drive, even if it's smaller, and then just store all of your programs on the mechanical hard drive. If, for instance, you have like a 256 gigabyte solid state drive, run your operating system off of that, and then run any program that lets you install it to a different drive onto the D drive now is what your other hard drive is going to get labeled as by default. Yeah, at least 1 terabyte. Frankly, it's irresponsible to go with anything less than 1 terabyte in today's world of technology. It's 2024. 4 even isn't overkill. It's just smart. The more, the better. I'd say 2 is perfectly reasonable. 1 is bare minimum. I would go with 4. That's a nice, comfortable number. If anything more than 4 right now, I don't know. Are you editing feature films? Are you running a black market streaming service? No? Stop showing off.
So let me ask this: if so, would it be wise to have a dedicated, basically a C drive where you're running all your programs, and then have, say, a D drive where all of your graphics are stored? That way, it's not running a program off of the same drive that it's pulling graphic data from.
I get what you're saying, but you're not optimizing anything. You're not saving any processing power by running off of different drives. In fact, if anything, you're making it work slightly harder doing that. Ideally, you want a as big of a hard drive as you can have, and everything goes on that one drive. Now, I was going to say the main reason that you're going to want to add extra hard drives after you've built your computer is it's been a couple of years and now it's outdated, and now everybody needs 10 terabytes of hard drive space as a bare minimum or something, for example. And so you need to add another 10 terabyte hard drive to your computer just to limp it along for another couple of years, because you're not interested in building a whole nother computer for $5,000 just yet, because of inflation has made it that high. So yeah, expandability is probably the most legitimate and the most common and often reason that you're going to want to install multiple hard drives. And that's fine. That's totally fine.
Okay, so basically try to keep it all on one hard drive if you can, just to kind of keep everything operational and keeping things efficient as far as speed goes.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's talk about RAM real quick. I know we already talked about video RAM or VRAM. I know X-Plane and Microsoft Flight Simulator are probably going to recommend probably about 32. Some people are running 64. More than that, you're probably just overkilling it.
I can't tell you how many times an older person in my life has come to me and said, my computer's getting slow. What do I do? Well, the only thing that's going to help at this point might be more RAM. RAM is the cowbell of computers. You want more. You always want more.
I could have used a little more cowbell.
Need more cowbell. Need more RAM. You will always need more RAM. Get as much of it as you can afford. Literally as much as you can afford. But that being said, 16 gigs is a great starting point. If they're recommending 32, do 32. That's great. 64 if you're trying to impress a casual nerd. 128 if you're a professional 3D designer doing renderings for Pixar, but then you probably have access to an entire server farm of a room full of computers, each with 128 gigs of RAM. Things to remember when you're installing RAM and shopping for RAM. Can you do a combo that adds up to a number that's not a power of 2? You may have noticed I said 16, 32, 64, 128. We're going up by powers of 2. But can you have a number like 18 or 24 gigs of RAM? Yes, I think you can. I just think it's easier to go with powers of 2. But if you want to max it out right away, if you've got the money to spend, go 128. Get yourself 4 gigs of 4 sticks of 32 gigabyte RAM if your motherboard supports it. So another thing you want to remember when you're buying RAM is you want to try and match the brand and the capacity and the clock speed with each stick that you buy, and the capacity. Like, you don't want to mix and match. You can mix and match a little bit, but you don't want to ever mix and match the clock speed. That's the most important thing to match up.
Could you take out what, like, if they're all, if you can't upgrade because you can't find more of them, can you take out what's in there and just put in whatever today's age of, whatever the new thing is, DDR5,
Yes.
whatever it is, you could just put in all new sticks of RAM, basically.
You can absolutely put in all new sticks of RAM, but your motherboard is only ever going to support one kind of RAM. They used to make combo boards. Maybe they still do. I tried a couple. I don't recommend them. It really just made things more trouble than it was worth. If you bought a DDR5 capable board, you're only ever going to be able to use DDR5 RAM.
Do you recommend, like, if you were going to put a bunch of money into you could easily put $2,000-3,000, as much as $4,000 to $5,000 or more, into all this stuff? Is it recommended that you try to figure all this out on your own? Does it matter if you hire somebody else to do it?
If you want to hire somebody else to do it, if you have no interest in putting this all together, and you spending $100 extra saves you some time that you would otherwise rather spend walking your dog or watching TV or going out to dinner with your significant other, then absolutely there's 100% no shame in that. But if you're looking for something to do, if you want more street cred as a geek or a nerd, then this is absolutely 100% doable. Like I was saying at the beginning, it's an attainable goal. I started building PCs in my late teens. Somebody built a PC for me, and when I needed a new part, I put in a new part, and I said, well, that was easy. Is that all this is? I just have to figure out what's compatible and stick it in? Yes, that's literally all it is. I think it's a great hobby and a great idea for anybody who is a gaming enthusiast and who's interested in computers. If it has scared you off that it might be too difficult, no, it is not. Do not let that scare you off.
At this point, I will always recommend building a flight sim like this using a PC. So if it's just going to work better, So
yeah, they're more customizable. They're built for that. Macs have their purpose, and they just work when there's something designed that's supposed to work that way, specifically that way, but they're not super customizable unless you're really deep into the nerddom of that. But I mean, at least from what I understand, I've just been a Windows guy from the get-go, and I'm still a Windows guy, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah. A Macs are fairly customizable, but they're only customizable once, and that's when you buy one off the Apple site. So you go through and you customize it like you want, and what you get when it gets to your doorstep is what you've got. You're not going to make a lot of upgrades at all from there on out. So, but if you do it right from the beginning, it might work. But when it comes to flight simming, it's not necessarily. You could beef the crap up out of a Mac. And that's not the issue. It's a lot of the software just plain doesn't work on a Mac. It just wasn't built for a Mac. A lot of the stuff just isn't compatible with the Mac. They just didn't make it that way. So, flight sim, yes, yeah, you could do it. But I think it's definitely a hobby that was made to be much more widespread in the PC world. So you're going to be able to take that hobby a lot further by using a PC, whether you built it yourself or had somebody else do it. So.
And fun trivia note here is the inside of a Mac is not fundamentally any different than the inside of a PC. It's all software based and standardization based that makes any amount of difference. They have their proprietary hardware and software. PC, IBM all has standardized software and hardware protocols. And once you learn the basics of those, you're going to understand how to build computers for the foreseeable future. And you're just going to have to update yourself each time you sit back down to build a new one and be like, oh, I didn't know that that was how solid state hard drives worked. But you still know what a hard drive is, what it's supposed to do. You just have to figure out a new way to plug it in. Not a big deal. So yeah, these things have not fundamentally changed since the creation of computers. Only the protocols and the form factors have changed. Just remember, if you're determined to make your own build, to make sure all of your parts are compatible, and ask yourself these core questions. Starting with your motherboard, make sure it's ATX. Intel or AMD, does the socket type match your motherboard socket type? Heatsink and fan, do you want to do water or air? It must fit your case and your motherboard's dimensions. I recommend air. Solid state hard drive or mechanical hard drive? What does your motherboard support? Get that. RAM, DDR5 or DDR4? Well, what can you afford? DDR4 is still pretty good, but DDR5 is the most recent. That's what I go with. I would recommend that. It's getting more mainstream at this point. And just know your motherboard's maximum capacity. Probably 128, might be higher. Don't forget to match your clock speeds. Probably 3200 megahertz. Case, go with something big and pretty. Not that big of a deal at the end of the day. ATX full size or server size. I recommend server size. Fans, make sure they fit your case. 120 millimeter, you can't go wrong. Power supply, ATX. Probably at least 600 watts. For if you're building a computer like what you and I both have, 800 is probably a good way to go. Just add up the wattage of every component, graphics cards to each stick of RAM, each hard drive, processor, motherboard, any extra cards or drives, multiply that by 1.5. Boom, that's how much wattage you need from your power supply. And just reference all of your specs back to your motherboard always. That's your main question to ask yourself. It will get you all the way there. Is this compatible with my motherboard? When in doubt, Google it. Yes, you can build a computer.
If you can build a flight sim, and a lot of people are building airplanes, a lot of people are building their own things. If you can do that, you could probably build the PC as well. So, if you want to speed up the process and do quick build, just have somebody else do it. Go check out Josh's podcasts. Don't forget to come back, hit that like and subscribe button here on Flight Sim Guides. And if you have any questions, leave them down in the comments, and I'll make Josh come back here and answer them, because I probably won't be able to. So.
Yeah, check out my podcasts. They're Beer with Buffy. Go to beerwithbuffy.com. We're on iTunes, Spotify, Podbean. Podbean's our main host. We always are looking for reviews on iTunes. That helps us. That helps our algorithm the best. I also co-host Wubba Lubba PodPod. It's a Rick and Morty podcast. As you may have guessed, Beer with Buffy is a Buffy the Vampire Slayer podcast. We're on all your favorite podcast platforms. Just type those in. We'll see you there.
All right, man. Thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate it. This has been great. It's been an honor. And we will catch up with you maybe in another video. See you.